Bonjour, bienvenue à cette 15e édition du symposium Imaging the Future. C'est la 15e édition pour ce symposium, pour la 19e édition du festival. C'est donc un événement qui nous accompagne depuis très longtemps et qui symbolise notre conception du fantastique, qu'on estime être un laboratoire esthétique ou le grand laboratoire esthétique du cinéma dans lequel se développe de la technologie et aussi l'histoire des effets visuels. On a la chance cet après-midi d'avoir avec nous un personnage qui compte beaucoup dans le monde de l'illustration, dans le monde du production design et dans le monde du développement de jeux, mais aussi pour le NIFFF, Greg Broadmore, qui travaille pour la société néo-zélandaise Weta Workshop depuis 2002. Il a eu plusieurs postes au sein de cette société. Il a travaillé, en tout cas dans le domaine du cinéma, sur des très grands films que vous avez certainement vus, District 9, King Kong, Les Aventures de Tintin et plein d'autres projets sur lesquels il a pu exercer son travail d'illustrateur, de production designer. Et donc, c'est une personne qui est célébrée de par le monde, et aussi en Suisse. Il est déjà venu au NIFFF il y a 7 ans, où il a participé au jury international. Et la Maison d'Ailleurs, le musée de science-fiction de la Maison d'Ailleurs, lui a aussi dédié une exposition en solo, qui était aussi un grand moment dans lequel on a pu découvrir les multiples talents de Greg Broadmore. Aujourd'hui, on va plutôt voir avec lui ses activités en tant que développeur de jeux. Il a développé ce jeu Dr. Grordbort'S Invaders autour d'un univers qu'il a construit patiemment avec beaucoup d'imaginaire pendant de longues années. C'est un univers rétrofuturiste qui est vraiment caractéristique de son travail. Et c'est assez intéressant de le recevoir parce que c'est un jeu qui est un jeu en réalité mixte. Et c'est vraiment une grande innovation. Donc on va pouvoir être au carrefour entre l'imaginaire et la technologie. Et c'est d'autant plus intéressant que l'année dernière, on avait donné une grande place à la Nouvelle-Zélande dans notre programme, avec un programme qui s'appelait What We Do in New Zealand. Et nous avons eu un collègue de Greg Broadmore, Patrick Wagner, qui était venu nous parler justement dans ce même symposium de leur vision, des développements qu'ils voulaient faire. Et donc on a déjà eu un petit peu une vision stratégique et maintenant on va pouvoir entrer dans la vision artistique. Voilà, je vous souhaite beaucoup de plaisir. Vous êtes des bien chanceux d'avoir l'occasion de l'accueillir. Je vous prie de l'applaudir. Voilà.
So hello everyone, that was a great introduction, thank you Anais. So I'm Greg Broadmore, I'm a studio director and game director at Weta Game Shop, which is the division of Weta Workshop that we've recently founded, or relatively recently founded, to make video games. But not just to make video games, we came about to make games specifically for the new Magic Leap 1 platform, which I'll tell you about today. And of course we're giving demos down the road of this as well, where you can get to experience what mixed reality or spatial computing actually is. So just to give you a bit of context, I've been working at Weta Workshop for about 17 years as a visual effects artist. I did a lot of concept design, worked on films like District 9, King Kong and so on, but I've personally never made a video game before. I've never built a studio before. Sorry, I have to track down on my notes here. How do we do this? Excuse me. And I certainly had never made a game on a platform while it was being built. So that was one of the exciting things about the challenge. I'd been wanting to make a video game for years and years and years. Even though Weta Workshop is famous for making films, it was important to me to make a video game, and I struck out to do that. And what we were offered, behind the desk please, is that where you'd like me to be for the audio? Thank you. The excitement was about getting to build a game on an entirely new platform and figuring out what the heck that even is. And it's one thing to build a game on a new platform where you might be like a new console or a new bit of technology like a PC or a new handheld or a new phone, but to build a game on an entirely new wearable platform is a total mind shift. So that's why I felt quite fearless about going into it, because not only did I not know how to make a video game on a whole new platform, I don't think anyone in the world knew how to make that game. So I thought I would figure it out for myself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about imagination, and I'm sure all of you are here because of this. And I'm sure many of you have a lot in common. I am an imaginative person. My life is always spent looking out in the distance and just seeing things come to life and happening. And my whole life has been about how do I make those things real? How do I bring imagination when I look out into the water to the beautiful lake here, Neuchâtel, I see Godzilla moving along. You know, that would be, right? So I'm like, how do I make that happen? So my whole life has been about that quest. And I grew up in a little place which I think is formative to this kind of imagination called Whakatane. That is where I'm from. This is how you pronounce it, Whakatane. It's a Māori name, and it means, Māori are the indigenous people of New Zealand. It means to act like a man, which is a weird story because it's actually from Wairaka, who's one of the tribeswomen from Whakatane. While the men were in on the canoes, on their waka, they came in to do fishing and come to ground. The women were all left out in the canoes, and the women aren't allowed to operate the canoe for some reason back then. Who knows? And but there was a massive storm, and the waka, the canoe, was starting to be washed out into the ocean. And Wairaka said, "Kia whakatane aho, I will act like a man." So she took control of the waka and saved it, brought it back into the beach, and saved the whole tribe because of that. Because without their waka, they would not have had their way of life. So it's so not only does Whakatane have a great sounding name, it is a really fucking good story to go with it. And where I grew up, it's all behind my house was bush and forest, you know, deep bush that just disappears off. And so for me, seeing these imaginative things is just, I couldn't help it really. It's just second nature. You look into the bush and you see dinosaurs. Off the coast of Whakatane was a volcano, an active volcano out in the water. So pumping gas into the atmosphere. Behind my house, massive bush, like I say, that we'd go exploring in. When I was a kid, the volcano was always erupting and belching smoke. And actually, no, before I was born, there was a tidal wave warning that they were going to have a tsunami. And so what did everyone in Whakatane do? They went down to the beach to watch it come in. I don't know if that's a uniquely Whakatane thing, but I grew up thinking, well, it's a primordial place and that we might be washed into the ocean at any time. And it already felt, like I said, that dinosaurs already lived there. It felt like another world. And so for me, all that feeds into that imagination. I always wanted to bring these things to life. And then this person came to me along this path and asked me, said, wouldn't you like to bring your imagination into the real world? And not just on a screen, not just on something in your pocket, but make it actually feel like it's really in the world with you. Just going to give you a little bit of context about Weta Workshop, which is where I am from. So, and why and how we would decide to make a video game in the first place. Because like I say, we're actually a physical effects workshop. We're known for our feature films and primarily for making the physical effects of those. So it's a place full of angle grinders, silicon molds, it's a place of sawdust and paint and fumes and chemicals. We make swords, weaponry, armor. It's a very tangible, hands-on place. Sorry, I'm going to try and... How do I track down on this? There we go. No, that just went forward. It's a very, very tangible place. And it's an interesting place in that when I grew up in New Zealand, it's a very small place, similar to this, I think, where you have 8 million people in Switzerland. In New Zealand, we have 5 million people or so. And we're at the bottom of the South Pacific in the ocean. When I grew up, there wasn't a place that you could go to for imaginative people. There was no career doing this kind of stuff. I grew up with comics and illustration, and I wanted to bring that to life, but there were no comics publishers. There were no one making films of this kind of scale. And Weta Workshop popped up, of course, through Peter Jackson. I learned that Peter Jackson was going to make Lord of the Rings, and I thought that's cool because his films are obviously amazing, but I really had no appreciation, no sense of just how grand his vision would be and what he could possibly bring to life. And of course, it was Richard Taylor and Weta Workshop that helped to bring that to life. And as soon as that film was out, there was a massive realization for me that here's me, I draw things, I bring my imagination to life just through little pictures on a page, but now I've discovered there's a place in Wellington where I live that does this for a living. There must be people there that have to draw orcs. There must be people there that have to draw dragons. There must be people that have to imagine all these things. Surely I can do that. And so luckily for me, I cold called Weta Workshop and met Richard Taylor, and he took me on a tour around the workshop. And I was bold enough or stupid enough to ask him when I could start. Do I start next week? And luckily he said to me, sure, come on in. And I just started getting straight into it. In fact, my first day at Weta Workshop, I thought I'd be doing concept design. That was what I was hired to do. But my first day at Weta Workshop, I was puppeteering a boat. I went down to the coast to a place called Red Rocks, and there's a huge boat from master and commander, like a sail ship. And on one end of holding a massive rod was this girl, Rebecca, and on the other end is me, and we're both pulling the boat up and down, puppeteering a boat, pretending like it's on the water while people fired hoses at it. That was my first day at Weta Workshop, and from there I jumped into concept designing and feature films and so on, like I said, King Kong and others. But along that journey, of course, I have an overexcited imagination, as I've told you. I can't stop thinking about inventing my own worlds. In my daytime, I'm working for Peter Jackson, making the dinosaurs of King Kong, but I go home in the evening and I started dreaming up the science fiction world of Dr. Grordbort's, which of course was lucky enough to bring down the road to Yverdon, to the Maison d'Air, which was a treat. And that exhibition from there traveled on around the world. It's been through China, been through other places in Europe, which has been bloody exciting. And I got to build that world layer by layer and add more and more to it and sort of figure out what it could be. It started with comics, which I know so well, and then turned into these props, into the collectible ray guns. And then layer by layer, as you can see here, we just built up a massive exhibition. The exhibition now is probably, I think, 250 to 300 works of illustrative art, another 100 sculptures, and dozens of other pieces beside. And like I say, along the way, my passion was really in video games. And I had always wanted to do that, but Weta Workshop doesn't make video games. It's not our skill set, it's not our background. We make physical effects. But I knew that's what I wanted to do, so I was starting to search for those opportunities. And really the logical thing was partner up with someone who already makes video games. So we talked to a local game studio. We went out and we talked to EA and Warner and Sony and a half a dozen other video game companies and publishers. And along that journey, we actually got a lot of interest, but it was blooming hard if you're down in New Zealand, you don't have any experience making video games. Trying to get that to come together was very tricky. But along our journey, a chap came along and visited us. His name was Roni Abovitz. And he came to us, he actually cold called Richard Taylor on a Saturday, I think, because he's in America, so he didn't know that there's different time zones in the world. And so he called on a Saturday, but luckily for him, Richard was in the workshop because Richard is always working. And Richard answered the phone himself, very luckily, and built a relationship with this chap, Roni. And Roni had a grand ambition to create his own science fiction world. So we started working with him, developing this potential feature film. We actually did that for maybe 3 or 4 years. And along that journey, he got to know about my Dr. Grordbort's universe, and he got excited with it, and he saw the potential there, knew that I was trying to do a video game with it. And he asked me at a certain point, or he told me that, hey, this is about 7.5 years ago now, I'm going to make these goggles, the science fiction goggles, and you're going to put them on, and you're going to be able to see virtual things in the real world, like literally in the world around you. Wouldn't you like to bring your Dr. Grordbort's world to life in that? Wouldn't you like to see Lord Coxswain standing in front of you, or have robots run around your lounge? Wouldn't you like to hold a ray gun and actually be able to burn a hole in your wall? And of course I would. I would desperately like to do that. Having your world come to life on a screen is fantastic, but I wanted it to happen for real, or as close to real as possible without getting burnt alive by a ray gun. So yeah, Magic Leap was born out of that. As you can see, the goggles, the final product. But like I said, we've been on a 7-year journey to build these things. In the end, we've got this beautiful device that really can do magic. But the journey to get there, to figure out how to do that, was an incredible one. And some of the first people I met, of course, when Roni offered this idea, wouldn't you like to see your ray guns for real in the real world with you? Of course I wanted to do it, but I also thought, well, that's not possible, Like, what are you talking about? I can't really make a ray gun. You can't really put digital characters in the world and have them walk around, That's not feasible. I thought, that'll happen, but that'll be in like 50 years or 100 years and I'll be dead, That's fine, that's science fiction. But he offered to fly me to Florida to meet with his crew, and I thought I will ask them a bunch of questions and I will kick the tires and see if they're idiots or they're maniacs or if they're geniuses. And it turned out they're geniuses. It's very, very lucky. And this is one of the chaps here, Sam Miller, Roni Abovitz on the left there. and scientific scrawlings of some of their very early work on the back, which is probably all not supposed to be seen. But anyway, blur it out in your imaginations. And this is a very early one of the headsets, just cobbled together, as you can see. All the early tech that we used was created like this, was just made of putting chipsets together and bits and bobs and duct taping it together. And when I met Sam, I came off the plane actually in Fort Lauderdale, and I asked him, we went to a diner, Ronnie took us to a diner in the middle of the night. And I said, so what do you do, Sam? And Sam said, I work at NASA, and I dock payloads with the ISS. I design the payloads for rockets that fly up, that use machine vision to look at the ISS, the International Space Station, and then dock with that payload so that we can get cargo up to the ISS. And I thought, of course you fucking do, because he looks like an astronaut anyway. He looks like he's from the Gemini space program. And that was just the kind of brilliant people that Ronnie had started to attract already. And for a bit of context for Ronnie, his background, not only was he incredibly imaginative, wanting to build this weird science fiction world with him, his background was medical robotics. One more click for that. So he had a background building, so he does surgery basically. So one of the tricky things with surgery, of course, is that if you open someone up, one of the riskiest things in surgery is the longer you're open for, the worse it can be, right? You want to really do a quick surgery and close people back up. So he thought for bone surgery, it's very difficult. You've got to open the person up, you've got to look at the joint, the doctor's got to figure out what's wrong with it, then they've got to close you back up, build a new part, and then they bring you back in, they open you up again, and then they put the piece back in, and then they close you up again. It's a very, very risky procedure because you're open for so long and you've got to be opened multiple times. And so what did he do? He decided to build motion-controlled bone surgery, where a robot would scan you, and then they would build a part without ever having opened you up using 3D printing. And then you would be, your arm or your hip, whatever joint it was, would be motion tracked, and a robot would knowing that motion tracking would open you back up, place the piece in, and the doctor could do all their work in a very minimal amount of time and close you back up, basically making the time that it takes to do that bone surgery a fraction. Anyway, the long-winded story to tell you that he was a brilliant person with a brilliant foresight and like figuring out how to solve these problems. And with Magic Leap, what he wanted to be able to do, like I say, is not only bring imagination into the world, but take 3D off screens, or take computing off screens where they're actually abstract. Abstract here is we're looking at a big 2D picture plane, right? Take it off that abstract picture plane and just naturalize it back into the world. You can see here some of the early tech. And as I say, the first of the 7 years I was working with Magic Leap, probably the first 5.5 were just working on everything being a hack. We just cobbled together what we could get. We would take whatever technology Magic Leap had at the earliest and bring it back, and we would try and build something on it. And I knew all the time that I wanted to build the Dr. Grordbort's game, and I knew what the end result needed to be, but how to make it was just a colossal challenge of imagination. And then, okay, like if we know that the game has to work on a headset, how do we do that? Maybe what we'll do is we'll actually print things out on sticks, and we'll run around the office pretending to play the game and figure out like what the AI would do. Early days, like when we didn't have meshing of the world, that basically this device builds up a model of your world simply by looking around. But when we didn't have that technology, we would build tools to simply mock up the room with you. All of this, I'm sure, sounds very, very abstract because it is very much the bleeding edge of technology. But it's the premise, like I say, is a wearable device that can make sense of the world around you and thereby allow you to take virtual content, whether that's medical, whether that might be architectural, whether it might be design, or whether it's a fantastical world like the ones I make, and simply populate them inside the world around you. And like I say, with the ultimate goal of removing the abstract of the screen. Not that screens are going anywhere in a hurry, because we have made many 100 years or more of beautiful screen content, so that will be a thing for a long time to come. And luckily you can of course do screens in Magic Leap as well, where you can, the great thing about Magic Leap is if you want to have one screen, you can have one screen. If you want to have 10, you can have 10. If you want to have a screen as big as an IMAX, you can do that. In fact, if you wanted to have a screen as big as a mountain range, you can do that too. There's nothing stopping you at that point. But yeah, everything was a hack. And so I would have to bring people onto our team, and I would ask them to have to take a journey with me and have to take a leap of faith, you know, in the very literal sense there. Like they or not very literal sense, but the analogy I would make for new team members is that we're on the mainland, and out there, across the water, there's a beautiful island called Magic Leap 1, and we're going to build a bridge to that island. Except we're going to build a bridge out of bamboo and duct tape and bits of twine, and every now and then, when we're about 2 kilometers out towards the island, we're going to look back and we're going to make sure that the Magic Leap technicians behind us are building the beautiful concrete and steel building, and they'll make sure that they pour concrete underneath us, because otherwise we will be living in the ocean. And it very much was like that. It was an incredible marathon of, like I say, building on pure speculation and hope, but trusting in brilliant people that you knew they would get the job done, and trying to make every grandiose job into something small and manageable and just do one thing at a time after the other, all building towards the grand vision of taking the abstract and making it natural. So, as I said, this is the world I decided to bring to this new technology, the world of Dr. Grordbort. I wanted to bring all these characters like Lord Coxswain, the Moon Mistress, Dr. Grordbort, and invent new ones like Gimbal, our little robot assistant, and have robots from another world come literally into your home and make you feel as if you are the center of a robot invasion, as if you are the action hero in a feature film. And I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to build it at human scale. So you can build content for Magic Leap or a mixed reality at any scale you could like. You could make a small tabletop game. You could make it very large. You can do all kinds of things. But I wanted to make it relatable to us. I wanted to make it what I call human scale, which is where the robots, the characters, they're all one-to-one scale with you. You appreciate them as if they're in the world with you. And hopefully you treat them as if they're real. I also wanted to make it tangible. I wanted to, we spent a great deal of time at Weta Workshop taking the fantastical and making it real, grounding it actually, making the fantastic and making it seem mundane, which is something we did a great deal of in District 9. It was one of the cores of that film, was to basically be able to take an idea that's outlandish, like aliens had come to Earth, but set it in a very understandable, actually downbeat kind of a situation in South Africa and in the poor suburbs, and then on top of that, shoot it in ways that are actually, like using found footage, using handy cams, using security cameras. This is, at the end, that way of shooting is simply a way of taking the fantastical and making it seem mundane, making it seem ordinary, because there's no, and that is all in the goal basically of making your audience believe it. So for me, I wanted to make this world as tangible as possible with all the detail, the rust, the rivets, the physicality, and make the characters in the world feel as if they were in your space with you and related to your space. So during a lot of the time here, we worked, as I said, in lockstep with Magic Leap. While they're developing the technology, our goal, our job, was to not just make the game, but ask them, we would be the end use case for what they were making. We would ask them how we would like the technology to be. So very simple things like, I want my game to be about ray guns. How on earth am I going to control a ray gun? I need to have a controller, and the controller can't just be like a PlayStation control where I push forward and it tips my hand up, or I press a button and it fires a trigger. I want to be able to hold a controller, and wherever I move it, it accurately tracks something to my hand. And what's interesting about that is that there are other controllers like this in the world. We call them 6 degrees of freedom controllers, 6 DOF for short. And that's a solved problem, except it's solved in the sense that you put up sensors in your room. So if you see virtual reality, for instance, you'll see you put a sensor up on your wall, or a cluster of sensors, or cameras, and now suddenly your head can be tracked and your controller can be tracked. But with what we were doing, we needed to make sure it worked anywhere. We didn't want you to be able to have to put up a sensor in your house. We don't want you to have to put up cameras. We don't want you to have to play it in one space that you've pre-prepared. We want you to be able to play it in your own home, wherever. Take it to your friend's place that works there. And so for the demos we're running here, we minimal setup. We just basically walk in, we scan the environment, and suddenly the game works. So that unto itself, the fact that you can control, I can look down and see a ray gun on my hand, and it works anywhere, is a miracle. It's an astonishing thing. I don't actually know how they did it. I know they use magnets, and no one understands those. So yeah, and that's for the entire technology. It's incredible at every level like that. Like I say, it's this device is looking out and trying to make sense of the world in the way that we make sense of it, so that we can build fantastical visions on top of it. And for me, the potential of that is absolutely huge. This is probably the most exciting medium for fiction since film, since the invention of film. It allows you have to treat the world as if it is interactive and dynamic. If you treat things as if you're like a film or like a lot of VR experiences where they're essentially linear, I think the value is diminished. The value really comes from when you make an experience reactive to the player, actually adapt to the player and react to their actions, which is what video games are all about ultimately. So it's taking video games, ripping them out of those old consoles and those computers and putting them back in the world with us. And they have to be more dynamic, they have to be more reactive. You have to think about things like, well, where is the player looking? You want to make sure that your character's eyes are looking at your eyes, that they feel aware of you. Little Gimbal here does a whole bunch of really clever little things, like he observes your personal space. He tries not to get too close. He wants to be in a sociable range, and his AI is figuring that out all the time. He also needs to navigate around your house, around your living room, and get to you. If you push him, he will be pushed out of the way. You can literally, because the device is tracking your hand, you can reach out and push him. And so you think about all your characters from that point of view. Our game scans the environment, and then it decides this is a really good place for Dr. Grordbort to be. So the character will pop up and then be able to move around. The robots are all doing the same thing, navigating your own home. They will, as you can see here, this is a scan of one of our test environments. It's actually the geometry you see here is actually just our one of our testing rooms. But the robots, as you see, are looking dynamically all the time to try and understand an unprepared space and then navigate it. So for some context, ordinary video games, they don't do this. Most video games, you make the level. If you're a game designer, you build the levels. Therefore, you know exactly where your AI is going to work. And you know the constraints. You know how tall the tables are. You know how wide the corridors are because you made them. In spatial computing, with what we do, we need to be able to make a game that simply works in anyone's home. And we don't know how wide the corridors are going to be. We don't know how, we don't know really anything about your space other than some very basic generalizations. And that's kind of the fun of making content on this. And the opportunity is that, like I said, you can bring your imagination to life and have it naturally coexist in someone's home or someone's life. And the potential from here expands. The first game that we've made is a game that works in your home, but even the next things we're working on are very large scale. We want you to be able to go out into the city, go out into the world, and actually have the game coexist at a sort of city scale with you. That's where we're going at a big level. So that is a lot of rambling about what Magic Leap is and how our journey. This is our team as of just when we shipped the game. Richard Taylor there and myself and the rest of this amazing crew. It took about 50 odd of us to build this game, like I said, over 7 years. It started with just me and Steve Lambert, one of our first artists, and then grew and grew and grew. And Magic Leap's teams, I think there's 1,500 odd people, including people here up in Switzerland, over in Zurich, who are working on this technology. And been great fun. And I would love you to come down, try out the demo and see what we're doing, because like I said, I truly think the opportunity for artists to bring your imagination to life and have it coexist with players and people is the potential is absolutely massive, and it's untapped. We've only just scratched the surface. We spent 7 years building this thing, but I would fully acknowledge that while we might know more than anyone else in the world, we are total amateurs. We still don't know what the medium is possible, what's possible in the medium. It's massive potential there. So it's very, very exciting to be at the start of it and to come here and share it with all of you. So thank you very much for listening to me ramble, and maybe we could raise the lights and take a few questions if anyone's got any. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fascinating talk. Well, questions are open. Vous pouvez poser vos questions, préférablement en anglais pour qu'ils puissent comprendre. I have a question for you.
Go for it.
You talked a lot about the potential of it has. Do you think of something already, or do you have like a secret universe that you want to come to life again, or something?
Yeah, so for me, the science fiction world of Dr. Grordbort's, I have barely even scratched the surface of that. There's stories and worlds I want to explore there. I deliberately chose to make a robot world because really for, what's the right way to put it? Ethical reasons, I suppose. I wanted to make a game where you had a ray gun, but I didn't want to make a game where you were shooting biological things because I knew that it would be much more real. So I thought, I want to have my cake and eat it. I think I'll make it so you shoot robots in the face because they're just robots, and they're not sentient yet, so they won't find out for another 30 years. So it's fine. But so for me with this world, there's a lot more creative place to explore. But I'll tell you the most exciting thing from the potential of the device that we found is working in multiplayer or multi-user. So we started making all of our projects. This first game is single player. It's designed for one person, as if that wasn't hard enough. It was incredibly hard to make a one-player game. But right at the end, we decided, okay, let's start making something in two-player, just a very simple thing. It wasn't even really a game. It was just, let's have two players in the same space and be able to see the same things. And as soon as we did that, that really cracked open a new Pandora's box. And so now, just to give you a bit of context, so when you're developing a game like this, let's say we've got a new build and I want to review, let's see what the current gameplay is. Let's look at the latest scene in the game. I would put on the device and I'm looking at Lord Coxswain talking to me and the gameplay, and the production crew are in the room with me, but they don't have devices on. And the designers, the artists, the animators, they don't have devices. I'm sitting there telling them, well, this thing over here, it should be a little bit more to the right. And, and like, it would be great if this thing here, whatever that thing is, that should be a little bit more yellow, And like, so you're trying to decode, like, because I can see this weird thing happening, but they can't see it. They know it because they've seen it before, but so that was a development problem. So that's actually the first reason why we instantly went to multi-user, to multiplayer. Now when we do reviews, there's 8 of us in a room all wearing the device. So now I get to point at the thing and we're all pointing at the same thing. And in fact, we can all sit there and make changes, we can edit it, we can adjust it. So we decided basically at that point that everything we were doing is going to be multiplayer from the ground up, which is a great way to approach this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Can't wait. Other questions?
Hi, thank you for the lovely presentation. I was here a few years ago when you presented the first draft of Grordbort'S.
Yeah.
And
nice.
it was really lovely and nice to see what's happening outside of that. My question is, do you have any thoughts of opening it up for other platforms, just not for Magic Leap? Or?
Good question. So everything we do at our studio is built off of the back of the relationship with Magic Leap. And so we kind of joined at the hip with Magic Leap. Half of my crew are employed by Magic Leap and half of them are employed by Weta Workshop. So we're kind of a weird hybrid studio. So from a technical level, it's like we are one and the same. So what we're going to do is Magic Leap. But from a creative point of view, from what ignites my passion, what do I want to do creatively, it's also Magic Leap. Like I think about it all the time. Would I make a PlayStation or an Xbox game or a phone game? And I think those games are cool. Like I do go and play them in my spare time. I still play traditional games. But that to me is like I'm now living in the future and I've seen the potential of what this technology allows. It feels like, oh, that would be a step backwards. So I'm very much looking forward to, the future from where we can go with this technology from here, how we can improve it. Because as amazing as it is, and it is incredible, don't get me wrong, there is many improvements to be made to it. We'll be able to improve the processing, improve the tracking, improve the understanding of the world, all kinds of machine vision things, improve all the technical performance characteristics of the device. So that from an experiential level, the device gets more and more interesting, and this whole category gets more and more interesting. So to me, that's where the creative potential is. Yeah, I feel like I've turned the corner and I can't go back. So yeah, actually, except for comics, I like making comics. Yeah, and noisy metal, heavy metal. Those two things aren't changing. I'll keep on doing those.
Hi, sorry. I don't know if the game is available. We can buy it.
Yeah, you can actually. So the only challenge is Magic Leap 1 is only available in North America at the moment. But the game is actually free on the system. So if you're able to get your hands on one, you can play it right now. In fact, it's been out since October. But As far as release here, I know that there are plans afoot to release to take Magic Leap globally. So I'm not sure of timescale, but it's not as far away as you think. So yeah.
Yes, just regarding the haptic feedback, is it implemented or is it planned for the future?
Haptic feedback is a very tricky one, absolutely. It's actually because so in the controller that we have, we call it, it's just simply called control. There's haptic feedback in that, which allows you to, you can imagine touching a virtual thing and you would feel some sort of vibration, or when you pull the trigger on the ray gun, you feel a little bit of a kick. You could also potentially put haptics in the headset, but to, limited kind of value there. Haptics, the real haptic challenge is like if I reach out and touch a virtual thing, how could I give haptics on that, right? Because now a character can be right here or a virtual thing, and if I touch it, it looks like my hand is touching it, but I don't feel anything. That haptic problem is not solved yet, and if you've got ideas, I'd love to hear them. Electric shock machine?
Another question in that direction is when are we going to be able to play that outside in the streets of Neuchâtel and not just in our living rooms?
Well,
is that in the near future or far future?
Andre here played it outside today, actually. Yeah, you played outside. Not that was a bit of a cheat. He was playing the game that's designed to be played outside, simply because the lights were off inside. So I thought I would just play it in the street. But a game where you would truly take it outside and have an awareness of the entire space around you, like the sort of Google Maps level of understanding of the space, there's probably a little ways ahead. And what you need to make that happen is really good network infrastructure to make that happen. So I think there are some obvious things on the near horizon that speak to that. There's things like 5G and so on happening. As those kind of networks come online, outdoor experiences start to really make sense. Yeah.
D'autres questions?
Hi. You mentioned some of the technical challenges that you've had. I'm really curious about those and how tough they've been to solve. Things like tracking or occlusion.
Yeah.
And obviously, with your visual effects kind of background, that seems to tie into that as well.
Yeah. So we don't have to solve too many of those. Our job, like I said, was to make the game, and we would ask the SDK people or the hardware people to implement certain features so that we could get things like that. Some of those things are still in their infancy, and some are getting better and better all the time. So for instance, with occlusion, the Magic Leap device builds up a picture of the world and actually builds up a mesh of the world. And so that provides you the occlusion that you need. If I scan this room accurately and a robot walks behind the podium, because the podium has been meshed, I can't see the robot, so you get the occlusion that way. If you didn't mesh it, then it's not there. But of course, if you use your device in a space for any length of time, you're going to end up meshing it even without being aware of the fact. This just naturally happens. As far as like occlusion of people, that's even trickier because people move. So you need to be like, updating them very, very quickly. But I think if you look out, if you've seen online recently, there is a number of things moving in that direction where you're able to dynamically picture moving content, specifically people, and then be able to mask. We don't do that in our game at the moment. So if you were playing our game and you walked in front of me, I would see through you to the other side. But that's a problem. That's the really fascinating and interesting thing about it, is that there are a whole bunch of technical challenges still to be cracked. And they're all the real world problems, which are utterly, utterly fascinating. So from a technical level, I don't have to solve them. I just have to ask someone. I know I want a robot to be able to walk around there, and I want them to walk around behind a player. Please help me fix that. And then someone far, far, far cleverer than me will smash all ones and zeros into a computer until that happens.
Thank you.
May I ask a bit more of a specific question about the game design? Saying like you present this game like you said that older games, like traditional games in a way, are a bit obsolete to your eyes because you're looking to the future.
Well, that would be harsh.
I mean, not negatively,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But how would you say you would kind of bridge the gap with something that can be seen, for example, for somebody coming from that traditional space of games that can see this as a bit of a gimmicky kind of thing and kind of convince him that this is worthwhile and can be like, you can do things with the design of it. like, of course, I'm not asking you to do a pitch, but
Yeah.
like, what's your idea on this subject?
That's an interesting one. Well, firstly, yeah, like traditional games are not obsolete, of course. Like I go home and I play Red Dead Redemption and dozens of other games. I love those games, and because in those games they're very, there's 30 plus years, 40 years worth of development history. There's a lot of technology and wisdom, built up years of game design thought that allows you to go to do amazing things on that realm. When you go from having a completely controlled space, which is the same in film where you control the screen, and in video games where you control that screen, it's easier in a lot of ways because, like I said, when you design, you prescribe the entire space from a design point of view. It's much harder to go to this realm because now you're giving away control. You don't know what the player's going to do. You don't know what people are going to do. You don't know if the cat's going to walk into the scene. You don't know where they're going to play. So you have to think much more dynamically and be much more, you go one of two directions. You either go very prescribed and you tell the player exactly what they need to do, like please sit in a chair with a meter in front of you, or you take the approach we did where you just make the game as agnostic to space as possible and try to make the game reactive and dynamic. But that's very, very hard, and I think we did a great job, but we've got tons of work to do to perfect that technique yet. But again, that's the fun of it. So for me, the exciting part for a new person coming in who might be reticent of it, firstly, maybe I'm insane. I don't think I am. But it's just a matter of fact, this technology is the future. Whether it clicks in exactly now or in 2 years or in 5 years is all beside the point. Like we've turned the corner and this stuff is going to change the world. It is absolutely just going to happen. So whether people are early to the party or late, that's up to them. But from a creative point of view, I think once you try it, you see, like I said, like you remove the abstract. I'm not having to look at a screen anymore. My character that used to live in here now lives in the world with you. That's massively exciting from an author point of view, from a fictional point of view. And then I think a lot of people that go into video games go in for the technical and the creative challenge. Like no one wants to make the same game twice necessarily. Most game designers don't. They want to do something new the next time, right? And so if you have that mindset that you want to challenge yourself, then this medium is the place to do it because, like I said, it's all pioneering ground. It's all new stuff to be found out. So I think a lot of game designers and just people who love telling stories will be attracted to the medium because of that, and they should be attracted to it because it's largely untouched. So it's exciting.
Hello.
Hey.
Don't you think the problem about this kind of devices and video games is you don't have a real scenario or story mode, and people will just think about it as a mini game and will not project enough to the game since there are not really backgrounds inside the game, but you have to read the comics or other stuff.
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly.
There is no real scenario like a BioShock game or the Witcher game, Red Dead Redemption. You have all of those characters and they have an interesting story, but in those kind of games, in augmented reality, that's just character, you shoot them up and that's it. So don't you think it's a problem?
I'm still not sure I understand the question. You're saying that those games don't exist in AR yet, or they can't? They can't for some reason.
I may be wrong, but I think it was asking like why are it looks like they're kind of in a vacuum. That there's a world out there with merch or comics. Things, but when you play the game, it feels maybe just like a mini game, right? And he's asking maybe if there's more involvement with narrative, but I'd imagine like you're.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so I mean, telling a narrative story in mixed reality is a different challenge, but I'll tell you. So our game that we're showing you demos of down the road, that's a 5-hour game. So there's a lot of story in it. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot that goes on, and we take you to. And instead of taking you to another place, we bring another place to you. We open an aperture on your wall, and suddenly you're looking into another world. So I think that was kind of part of our job, was to show what a large-scale video game could be. So our game is certainly not a mini game, although we've made a little mini game as well. But the opportunity is to do as big as the biggest AAA games, and in fact, the biggest games on this medium will end up eclipsing and dwarfing everything that's gone before it. Like I said, you'll be able to paint the real world with a new paintbrush. Bring the fantastical. Imagine if you lived inside The Witcher or inside BioShock. Well, that's the potential of this, and it gets to correlate accurately with your world. So you're not tripping over the couch. You're not playing VR and walking into a wall. That to me is very, very, very exciting to have, and not only that, have virtual characters that coexist with the real world and interact with other people in day-to-day life, and then have people remotely join you in from afar as well. I think there's a really interesting potential for the existing mediums like computer games, PC games, phone games, and so on, for those things to plug into this world. So you imagine you're in a Magic Leap headset or a spatial computing system, and a person who's on their iPad at home, maybe they're flying a rocket around in the world with you, and they get to see a mesh of where you're at. So you could potentially be playing games with people that are separated, even though you are observing them in your physical space. So from a fictional point of view, there's, again, huge potential there, and that is not just mini games. Although, I think that because some of the early stuff that's been released, we were working on it for 7 years, so we got to make something very significant, and that was my mission. But a lot of companies came in at the end and quickly tried to put something together. A lot of mini games or smaller things were made, and that naturally happens with a new platform when people are exploring it, trying to figure out what it even is, because it is like head-scratchingly hard to figure out how to do this. It's it's very challenging, and so people they're risk averse. They'll do something small and figure that out, and then as they get their footing, they'll build bigger and bigger things. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
And
Cheers.